Temple family, we apologize for the late start. Of course, there's some technical difficulties that you have to figure out sometimes, and that's what we had to do. But we're here, and we're glad that you're here, right? And thank you for sticking it out with us. Welcome to another edition of The Road Ahead, Temple family. My name, of course, is Frederick Morton Jr. I'm the founder, chairman, and chief executive officer of Temple Networks. And we are pleased once again to have you join us here on The Road Ahead for another riveting discussion on one of the most important topics impacting the Caribbean, at least I believe, particularly as we navigate through the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. And that topic is reparations. Now, reparations is about addressing the devastating impact of perhaps the darkest chapter in human history, the extraordinary crime against humanity, slavery. Making the case for the colonial empires, including the United Kingdom and Portugal and France and Spain and Holland and so many others, that profited greatly from the slave trade to participate in solving the myriad of problems that they created. Now today, we discuss the specific case for Caribbean reparations, CARICOM's leadership in this area, and specifically the 10-point action plan that was created to guide this process. In this regard, we are privileged to have with us a very distinguished panel of experts, a lovely panel of experts, I might say. And we are ready to go and to tackle this very provocative issue. In moderating, I am joined by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Hugh Riley, partner at the PM Marketing Group and former Secretary General of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, who, as customary, will introduce our esteemed guest panel. Hugh, good afternoon to you. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you, Frederick. An esteemed panel, it certainly is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Maureen Shepard is a social historian, vice chair of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, director of the Center for Reparation Research, and the immediate past director of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the University of the West Indies. A published author, she's written several books, many on subjects which we'll be discussing here today. Most recently, she was one of 60 women included in the Gleaners Jamaican Women of Distinction for 2020. Professor Verene Shepard, welcome to The Road Ahead.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Dorbrene is chairman of the Antigua and Barbuda Reparations Support Commission, a government-appointed commission whose mandate includes organizing education and awareness programs connecting reparations, concerning reparations for the enslavement of our ancestors, and establishing links with organizations with similar mandates. He is a management consultant, an author, a director, and a playwright who has written 5 plays. He's also a calypso writer, judge, and panelist. He was awarded the 2010 Friends of the Arts Sunshine Award for contributions to arts and culture in the Caribbean. Mr. Dorbrene, welcome.
Thanks so much. It's my honor, my privilege.
Great to have you with us. The Honorable Cozier Frederick is a member of parliament in the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica, representing a constituency which includes the Kalinago territory. His portfolio is Minister for Environment, Rural Modernization, and Kalinago Upliftment. He serves on the Dominica Reparations Committee and the Kalinago Events Committee. Minister Frederick is a researcher, an educator, martial artist, careful now, and visiting artist, and works with numerous youth organizations, civic groups, and the Kalinago Council. He is a regional and international speaker on Kalinago heritage and was Dominica's country coordinator of the International Caribbean Ties exhibition produced in the Netherlands in 2019. Minister Cozier Frederick, welcome to The Road Ahead. Frederick, that's our distinguished panel.
Yes.
Let's proceed.
Yes, distinguished indeed. Now, welcome everyone once again. Now, a few months ago, you would have recall that we began this discussion with another panel of leading experts, including Sir Hilary Beckles, the Vice Chancellor of the University of West Indies. And no, I absolutely love how Sir Hilary summarizes the issue of reparations. He does it in such a succinct and concise way for everybody to understand. So let's take a moment to listen to what he said in terms of bringing a context to this discussion, and then we'll jump off. Let's have a listen. Before we can discuss reparations itself, we first need to address, in my opinion, the context in which the need for reparation arose. Sir Hilary, I have heard you succinctly and eloquently summarize the historical and contextual underpinnings of slavery that form the foundation of the reparations case on many, many occasions. And you do that brilliantly. I would like to lean on you once again to do so as we begin this discussion. So Hilary.
Well, thank you very much. It's a tremendous honor and pleasure to be with my colleagues on this panel and also to engage your audience on this very important matter. When we speak of reparatory justice in the context of the African experience in the modern world, what we are talking about is the greatest crime that has been committed in respect of humanity in the last 300 to 400 years. We are looking at, in the first instance, a Western economic structure that sought to maximize its production, its profitability, and its income generation. And the way they went about doing that was to globally enslave millions of African peoples, not only in the Americas, but in other parts of the world. It was indeed a global economic system. But slavery and the chattel enslavement of Black people, and we're not speaking about slavery in generic terms. We are speaking about a specific kind of enslavement, which we call chattel slavery, where you convert people into property, you deny their humanity, they are not part of the human family, they belong to a special species of property. You legislate that, you build that into your constitution, and you take millions of people, reduce them to the level of chattel real estate and property, exploit them for your own enrichment, and at the end of that process, you said you're going to walk away from it. It's in the past, it's behind you. That historical experience is very much a contemporary experience. The legacies of that crime and the diversity of the crime, the legacies are with us all around us today. You and I, we are very much still the victims of this. So we cannot disconnect that historical circumstance where this enormous crime was perpetrated from the consequences of it today in my time and in your time and our parents' time. This is the world in which we live today. And as such, we are entitled to justice. The crimes must be litigated, they must be settled. And until it is done, the challenge of victims feeling a lack of trust and commitment in the modern world, and those who believe that they could brush this under a carpet, walk away from it, don't look back, that is not the way in which the world can proceed.
Powerful. Very powerful.
Right. So there we have Sir Hilary's succinct delivery of the issue. Let's start with you, Professor Shepard, right? You know, one of the first things you do typically when you've done something wrong or you've caused harm or pain to someone, we know is to apologize, right?
Absolutely.
And that is in fact the first point, and I assume that that's why it's there in the CARICOM's 10-point plan
Yes.
of action. Can you provide some context to that, that apologetic statement that is necessary? And in doing so, you could perhaps outline the entire plan for us.
Okay, right. So you heard Sir Hilary talk about the crime against humanity. And so that is the justification for the demand for an apology, because an apology is necessary, as you have outlined, when you commit a crime, when you do something wrong. And he has very eloquently explained what we're facing, what is the crime. So the CARICOM 10-point action plan rightly starts with the demand for a full formal apology. A full formal apology owns up to a wrong that is done. That's the first thing. There are 3 dimensions to an apology. A proper apology. You own up to the wrong. You say, yes, I did this, or my country did this. You apologize for what happened. You say it was wrong, we're culpable, and yes. And then you commit to repair and non-repetition. So that's there. But let me explain that the plan is not a sequential. In other words, if we never get an apology, we're not moving on to other parts of the plan. So the second point is Indigenous Peoples Development Program. The third is repatriation for those who desire it. And repatriation, by the way, is interpreted more broadly than being taken back, fully funded, to the place from which you were stolen. This is about also returning artifacts and documents that reside elsewhere and not in our space. Then number 4, the building of cultural institutions. Number 5, the attention to public health crisis. Then we go on to illiteracy eradication, the rebuilding of an African knowledge program, psychological rehabilitation because of the harm of slavery and colonialism on our mental state and our psyche, technology transfer, and then debt cancellation, debt write-off, and monetary compensation. Now, monetary compensation only because of the money, the 20 million that was paid to enslavers. We're asking back for that, as well as what apprenticeship would have valued. But apart from that, it's a development package that we're asking for. But an apology is very important. Other people have been given an apology, but in our space, people, states and leaders have gone around it to issue statements of regret or to express deep sorrow. That is not an apology. People make the mistake of thinking that that is an apology. It is not an apology. And so we are saying an apology is due, and we reject the notion that some people are using to deny us the apology, saying that it's too far in the past. So they're using the theory of distant to disconnect the crime, the historic wrong, from the contemporary legacies of that crime.
Okay. Well, 2 things. Well, there's so much that flows from your statement, but 2 things that I'd like to follow up on. The first is, has there been any nation, any country that has issued the form of apology that is delineated in the 10-point plan? And then, well, let's start with that.
Okay, so as the first serious demand from a state perspective would have been made during the bicentennial 2007, when Britain and its allies would have been joining to quote unquote celebrate the passing of the act to end the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans. And so that was an occasion when civil society groups, states demanded an apology from the UK in our case. That was not forthcoming. What the former Prime Minister Anthony Blair did was to say, we regret, we're sorry. But, and then other ones have continued, like former Prime Minister David Cameron, when he came to the region in 2015, in the same year that Britain finished paying off the loan it borrowed to pay the planters the compensation money. And he said, we don't believe that's the way to go. Let's go forward and forget about slavery. And others have toed this line. So no, they have not, though they have apologized to other people. I remember when the Queen of England went to Ireland in 2011, and even before that in 1997, when former Prime Minister Tony Blair went to Ireland, they did offer some kind of apology for, colonialism. But so far, they have given apologies to other groups. For example, the former Prime Minister of Australia, to the Aboriginal people, Kevin Rudd. And in the United States, states have apologized, but not the federal government, you see. So we are calling on states, not just financial institutions and educational institutions, to make the full formal apology, and so that we can go to the next step.
Okay, I'm going to ask one follow-up question, and then I'm sure my co-host Hugh Riley will want to jump in. You did say that an apology or the 10-point plan is not sequential.
Yes.
And so I guess it would suffice if certain parts of the plan were addressed without the apology. In that regard, I mean, how important is it to get that up?
Well, we're still calling for it. And yes, you're right. I did say it's not sequential, because we have been working on other parts of the plan. I was introduced as a director of the Center for Reparation Research, which was established in 2017 by the University of the West Indies at the request of the heads of government. And we have been having seminars on the 10-point action plan. So we have been doing the research and finding the justification for, say, illiteracy eradication or for psychological rehabilitation. And I've given lectures on psychological rehabilitation and involved psychologists and psychiatrists in that. So we're teaching and disseminating knowledge about the justification for the 10 points. And these are also in any conversation or any lecture we give or any conversation we had with any representative of states. For example, in our space, the High Commissioner for the UK in Jamaica or in other parts of the Caribbean. So we use the plan as a negotiating strategy, but we are still saying that the full formal apology should occur to any one of conscience. That is the first thing you ought to do.
Right. Well, you get no objection from me on that. Mr. Riley.
Yeah, well, thank you, Professor Shepard. I mean, you've given such an interesting explanation of where we are on the whole business of reparatory justice. And one of my questions, actually, I have two questions, and both at the same time. One is, what's the region's response been as a Caribbean group to the matter of reparations? And you did explain that there's been a lot of discussion at the level of government to government, and certainly you yourself and the academic institutions have gone to the trouble of teaching what this is all about. But the second part of my question really is, how are Caribbean people engaged in this? Is it entirely an academic discussion at this stage?
Absolutely not.
Caribbean really engaged with this business of reparations?
The national committees on reparation, they're called different things. The National Commission, the National Council, the Support Committee, whatever it's called. We have national bodies in many Caribbean countries. And again, this was one of the strategies laid down by the heads of government. And the members are from a diverse group of people. In Jamaica, for example, and I'm sure in Antigua, Barbuda, we have Rastafari, we have representatives of the churches, we have academics, we have trade unionists. So it's a broad-based conscientizing in our space process. In other words, we're educating and we're having conversations with NGOs and civil society organizations, with teachers and with students. In fact, the St. Lucia Reparation Committee has partnered with the Center for Reparation Research on a year-long schools lecture series to ensure that the children get this information. So it is not a top-down effort, it's lateral, and it's taking place all over the Caribbean. And also, we have engaged internationally. We have connections with the National African American Reparation Commission in the United States. We have partners in EU countries, in Sweden, in the Netherlands, we have in the UK. So it's broad-based, and we're trying to build a mass movement for this, not just academic, not just states. Because you know, states require support from the constituencies.
Okay, excellent.
We have, before you continue, Hugh, folks, you have noticed that we've lost 2 participants. I believe that there has been some sort of technical difficulty that is being worked out, but they'll be back. So Professor Shepard, you're more than capable of holding the fort down. So we realize that, in fact. So here's Minister Frederick.
I think the minister is back now, yes.
Yes, indeed. My point remains, though, that you're more than capable. Hugh, you have a follow-up question? If not, I do have a question.
Please go ahead.
Hugh?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, well, all right, fantastic. Well, Professor Shepard, you touched on something, and clearly this cannot just be an academic discussion for it to really take root. So it's heartening to hear that you know it's not seen that way, and that it's moving in a more broad-based discussion.
Even if it is seen that way, that's not the truth, is what I'm saying.
Right. Okay.
People who may perceive it that way, but on the ground, I don't see how they could. We even had a run for reparation, a youth run, a youth rally for reparation.
Okay.
It moved up from, you know, Antigua, Barbuda, Barbados, Guyana, and the center has actually been going around. Well, COVID has interrupted that, but we were the Caribbean to talk to media. I mean, I've been to Antigua, Barbuda on the radio, the TV. So we're using media, and that is why we thank you so much for this platform, because media the various forms of media are important to get our message out. And we're everywhere trying to educate about this issue.
Awesome. Well, you certainly have Tempo Networks, as we've mentioned before, as a major platform to disseminate this information. You can count on us. There is a, oh, absolutely. There is, you did mention, and this is a very interesting topic for me. I mean, the part of the plan that talks about the psychological impact of slavery, right? So the Honorable Robert Nesta Marley said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Well, actually, it was Marcus Garvey, right?
Marcus Garvey.
Yeah, it was Marcus Garvey, but a lot of folks would say it was Bob.
He popularized, he's popularized it, that's okay. We all quote from other people, right?
That's it. That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, I am a Garveyite because for many reasons, but I was born on the same day as Marcus Garvey, which is August 17th.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I'm a Garvey for sure.
Yes.
But he did say emancipate yourself from mental slavery.
Yes.
So give us a sense of the impact of slavery on our mentality, our thinking, our psychological, perspective and view that has caused this sort of devastating impact in so many areas. Can you give us a sense of that?
Well, first of all, let me say I'm not a medical doctor and I have not diagnosed people, right? But
right.
I think that we are looking in our society to see certain manifestations of what our conversation with psychologists and psychiatrists would say. Well, that's a manifestation of a person or a society or a set of people who have lost something. And I see that, I think we are not too clear about our origins and identity. And even if we are clear, not everyone wants to accept. If you go into a room before you give a lecture and you say, put up your hands, how many people are Africans? I guarantee you won't even get 10% of people in our space doing that, okay? So that's a sign that you are denying your origin and your identity, which goes back to Africa for the majority of people across the Caribbean. Then we have these pro-colonial tendencies. We are, it's almost like we're a people suffering from identity theft. People stole our identity, they stole our names. They told us our spirituality or beliefs were wrong. They told us that they changed our names. They even taught us to be ashamed of the black skin, even though Marcus Garvey said it's not a badge of shame. But many people are bleaching because they are ashamed of their black skin. Or in our Caribbean, I don't know if you have ever confronted this. We have heard people give people nickname of Blackie, you know?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Yes, and stuff like that. There are even people whose surname is slavery because the plantation owner did that to denigrate our people. We are arguing in 2020 about hairstyles. That, it's not corporate, so you can't wear Rasta locks or sister locks. And in Jamaica, we have a case where a young girl was told, don't come back because that hairstyle is going to, is not okay for school. And also it will attract, lice and jonjo and all this kind of thing. So I'm saying that psychologically we're damaged because of the oppressive nature of enslavement, because of the oppressive nature of this crime, because of the rape, the sexual torture of our mothers or grandmothers or our family. And so we see it coming out in many ways. We don't even want to make Caribbean history something that children should study, I don't want to go on and on about it, but and look at the poetry of some of our people, especially when they are in exile, when they live abroad. Look at Una Marson. She has written poems like Kinky Black Hair, Kinky Blues, I Am Black, they call me nigger. And if you read all those in exile, all the literature of people written who have been in exile, meaning voluntary, yes, but they're not in the Caribbean for one reason or another, they are away and they write back, Lamin and others, wait. So we know what the effects are, and psychologists are telling us what the effects are. We need to repair that, but the reason it's on the 10-point plan is that it can be repaired with more social infrastructure to address that, mental health facilities, and also educational institutions so that we don't discriminate against people who are mentally challenged.
Mr. Riley, what an amazing answer, eh?
I think so. Some of what you've said, Professor Shepard, we really would love to hear
more.
Yes, indeed. And Dorbrene Omard is ready and willing to talk about some of that. But unfortunately, he dropped out of the panel at the moment because of our technical issues. I don't think Dorbrene's back yet. One of the things that Professor Shepard that's so poignant, is that there are people who are saying, well, why are we talking about this now? Why do we want an apology now? I mean, it's so far in the past. And then you bring it all right home to us and to the present and start looking at the effects that this genocidal act is still having on our people. It is not about the past. It is very, very present. Very, very quick story. Recently, I had a conversation, family connection type conversation, and pointed out to some people in that discussion that my own grandfather, with whom I was very close, was born in 1902. His mother, whom I also had conversations with when I was a boy, was born in 1884. Her dad was born in 1851. I mean, people make it sound as though we're talking about something that happened in the Middle Ages, and we are talking here about effects on our lives today, and we're talking about people that we knew who were from the 1800s.
Absolutely. Because Alexander Mighty, who is my great-great-grandfather, was born in 1829. So personal to me, that is my family. We have managed to trace. So it's not too far in the past. And also I did my DNA test because I know I'm suffering from identity theft as well. And I'm trying to recover some of what was stolen from me. And my DNA test puts my mother's family squarely in Cameroon. How did people from Cameroon reach over here? Why does my DNA test show Cameroon? Somebody is responsible for that. And that's part of this reparatory justice movement. And we're using everything we can, all measures, all strategies, to try to hold people account and to say, reparation has been paid to other groups. What about people of African descent? What about African people? The closest they came for African people would have been in the case of the Mau Mau. And even so, just like the UK High Commissioner here in Jamaica said, we don't pay for people. Our ancestors cannot be so treated as dead people who don't matter. They matter in the way that George Floyd matters. Breonna Taylor she matters. So they are dead, but they matter. And I think what we can do for their legacy, as other people I see doing now, there are financial institutions, there are universities, there are insurance companies like Lloyd's of London, taking responsibility, owning up and saying we have to engage in a reparatory justice conversation. But states have remained reticent. And we're calling on the state to say, you created the environment within which all these institutions and so on, we're not taking them off the hook, but we're saying, somebody started this, you capitalized it, you conceptualized it. Your cities got rich from it. You built the ships and you co-opted other people in your criminal enterprise. Therefore, you have the major part of the responsibility.
Indeed, indeed. I'm sorry, I couldn't agree more. In fact, you know, you mentioned some institutions, but even the Church of England, even churches benefited, right? That's right. And the owning up to that is now at a point where it must happen, and we must demand it.
Yes, but this, as Professor Beckler says, this can't only be the year of apology, or the year of apology. You need to do something. So this is one step, even if it is that they were using the word apology, which you're not. And some of them who are using apology, they are saying, but not for the historic wrong. We will give you grants and aid and so on. We're not mendicants.
That's right.
Right. It's a right. You harmed us. It's a right.
Indeed, indeed. Let's take a little journey over to Dominica. I think the nature island is calling. Minister Frederick.
Thank you, Frederick. How you doing?
I'm terrific. I'm terrific. Thank you. I'm glad that you were able to get back in. We missed you for a moment. Right. Okay. So let's talk about. Let's take a step back, I suppose, right? Because there were folks here when Columbus decided he discovered the place, right? There were folks living and thriving and happy. And then Columbus comes and says, I discovered the place, and then we know what happened after that, right? So let's talk about reparations as it relates to the indigenous population, right? So like the Kalinago population of Dominica. Can you describe for us the case for reparations for indigenous people in particular, and how that fits into the case for the enslaved Africans?
Yes, so Frederick, I want to feed off the energy of Professor Shepard.
Great energy.
Yes, that energy there. Just to say that that for a very, very long time, the sort of disconnect with the indigenous population was sort of something prevalent in our Caribbean society, and we are happy to be part of this movement for reparative justice, because of course it all began with us. These people came and they invaded our space. And while we stood and we fought a battle and battles, and we were on the verge of extinction, and we were not willing to participate in that sort of capitalist enterprise, and we see the gradual movement of getting the other people, in that sense, people of African descent. So we have to dig deep into that past, and there's a lot of archaeological evidence to suggest that there was a thriving population in the archipelago, all the way from Bahamas in the north to Trinidad in the south, and we have seen a sort of movement during the time of conquest to label that population as being ungodly, barbaric, animal-like, and to create a sense that these people are inhuman, so they should be gotten rid of. And I have argued many times that the entire Christian doctrine of discovery was really what caused the demise of the indigenous population. And I say it without categorizing the population, because even the European chronicles would suggest that the European eye could not discern the differences. So I as a modern day indigenous brother, I refuse to use terms like the Arawak and Taino and Kalinago, because I think we are continuing to perpetuate the categories created by someone who came, and it is something that we have to kind of emancipate ourselves from. And just knowing that we had a rich culture, a very rich heritage, and some of it, I will tell you, is very prevalent in our present day society. So, for instance, Prof spoke about the identity theft, and we lost our names and our religion. All of this, there are countries in the Caribbean that are indigenously named. Jamaica, for example, and Haiti, for example, and it is not part of the popular discourse. So we are still, while we are on a move for reparations and justice, we must also take some time off and deconstruct those sort of categories created by the colonizers. A country with its own flag and your national flower and your own anthem and your own national dish. All of this is really sort of separating us within the Caribbean space. And so we are not gravitating towards the collective. And that collective would have come out of the indigenous population, where we were moving freely across the Caribbean region and trading. And so the idea of a free movement of people was evident in that space for such a long time. So we understand the path. We understand that there has to be justice. And like Prof said, it is not too late. It has to be part of the conversation. And we have to have an unlearning or a re-education of all of the aspects that cause us to be in that state. So a small population exists in Dominica, but I can guarantee you that if we do a proper DNA analysis of the entire region, we will find pockets of indigenous population right across the Caribbean. Some of it is evident in facial features, etc., but some of it is also evident in the way people socialize and the way they participate in everyday activities. So we want this to be done.
I get it 100%. And you made a statement right at the end about sort of cataloging. Do you know? I mean, is there certainly a desire, but is there an effort to catalog the size of the community at this point, or do you have some understanding outside of Dominica of what the population is throughout the Caribbean?
Yeah, so we have a basic understanding, and there's also the move to create this kind of connectivity, because we know for a fact that there are the Garifuna in St. Vincent, which was a mixture of the Kalinago and people of African descent. We also know there's a small community in Santa Rosa in Trinidad. And we know that there's an emerging consciousness in Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, for instance, of people going back to tracing their roots to the Taino. So there's that movement. So it's an exciting movement. because it is such a it is a regional movement, and that's the kind of view I would like us to appreciate, that reparative justice, the justice for genocide against indigenous peoples of the Caribbean, it is a regional movement. We should not confine it to a particular European style construct, because really, folks, what we're doing, if we don't break down those barriers, we're creating consciously this for ourselves, something that not assist us in understanding and appreciating the need for that sort of justice. So we do have.
Sorry, if you could just allow me to piggyback on something he said. May I? Yeah.
Of course.
And I just wanted to say thanks to Minister, because I told you about the lecture series that we have in collaboration with the St. Lucia Reparation Committee, and MP Cozier Frederick was part of a panel, and that lecture was titled The Myth of Extinction. And so because that's one of the things that we have to do, not just with the children, but with our own adults who believe that, oh, what are we talking about? Where are these people? You know?
Right.
There. And so I wanted to mention that lecture. And we had another lecture before that where we had the chiefs, some of the chiefs, talking to the children themselves to say, we are here. We have always been here. Our people have been here. Santa Rosa community, they also spoke. The chief from spoke. So I hear the minister calling for decolonization of the narratives. And this is where the Center for Reparation is also aligned. You know, we are part of our role is to research, disseminate, engage in decolonization, which the University of the West Indies has been doing for a very long time, ever since it was established, trying to clean up that misunderstanding and mislabeling and the myth of discovery and others. We want to ensure that our children know that people are here, but that genocide, they were genocidal acts. They think that because we say they were subjected to genocide and genocidal intentions and actions, so why are they here? So we have had to clarify that it doesn't mean every single one has disappeared. And so to talk about what Minister referred to as the reclaiming our names. Now you talk about Haiti, but remember, we should be saying Haiti, not Haiti.
Haiti, that's correct.
And Jamaica has also been changed, you know, from the initial spelling and pronunciation. And I know that in Dominica, when I was there to give the Eugenia Charles public lecture, I came upon a controversy. There was a movement to change the name back to Waitukubuli. But no, the Colombian name of Dominica has stuck. So we have, the point is, while we are saying Black Lives Matter and looking outside of the Caribbean, we need to focus here and say, but we need to do something here as well. We need to teach that African people's lives did not begin with the trafficking, as dastardly as that was. Ivan van Sertima, the Guyanese scholar, has told us they came before Columbus, and we have evidence. So I hear your appeal for decolonization. We're on board with you for renaming, for us to see ourselves as a collective, but also to understand that what happened to the indigenous people was a crime against humanity, and they have had to just rebuild their lives, and we honor them for the effort to do that. And we are struggling as African people too, to even bear a collective name of African.
Yes.
I just thought I would, you know, interject those few points.
Yes,
They're very important points. Mr. Riley.
Absolutely. And I mean, to give further context to it, I mean, first of all, we are talking about continuity and lineage, and we're talking about a very strong cultural and historical presence that we obviously still have and will continue to have. But we're also talking about genocide in the sense that, I mean, the history tells us that in 1700, there were 3 million indigenous people in the Caribbean, and genocide took care of those numbers to a large extent, to the point now where Indigenous peoples are down to the tens of thousands and no longer millions. But the point's well taken that we're here to stay. And let me not forget to say what an honor it is anyway to meet someone on this panel.
Indeed.
Absolutely, who is Kalinago. Sir, pleasure to have you with us as well. I have a quick question for you, Minister. So the CARICOM Reparations Commission lists Indigenous peoples development as a specific item on the 10-point action plan. What is that? How will that program work? And how far along is it?
Yeah, the development plan is an attempt to create opportunities for the indigenous population. And for sure, the University of the West Indies has led that movement. And I'm a product of that movement. That's why I'm very proud to be part of this panel. In 2008, I received this Afro-Indigenous Scholarship. It is something that I would have loved to have done many moons ago because I came to university very late. And my parents couldn't afford it, etc. And I was given the opportunity to go out in a neighboring Caribbean island and to understand the movement for an education. And at the UWI, I did the history and political science, and that's why. So I'm not an MD by chance. I can say for the record that I am a member of Parliament because of the move in 2008 and a little before, to have some form of program that positively affects the indigenous population. So I'm a product of that initial movement. And so although within the community on the island, we have this concern on are we going to get caught a check? Are we going to get the monies in our bank accounts? But it's also important to know that the reparative movement is beyond, it's more than a single check or a monetary payment. It has in it an ability to create institutions and programs that can positively affect lives. Because like Prof said earlier on, we have seen the disruption of our people and loss of identity. And these programs have to encourage that movement. The teaching of the history in our schools, in the curriculum, the using of our names. Actually, I have a son, a 4-year-old son. I named him a Kalinago name because I thought it would be a wise thing to honor the ancestors who had names of their own. And so all of this is important, and we are right now doing a bit of the English language itself, getting bits and pieces from the archival material from the French missionaries. So the program is something that we're doing, and I must say, I'm not being biased here by saying that the present government with which I serve have done a lot toward that sort of movement. We have established the Ministry of Kalinago Affairs, a department over a couple of years. We have had a name change in 2014 from Carib to Kalinagos, which is now official. We see a number of people getting involved in the public service. The opportunities are shared equally for people of indigenous descent like myself. So all of these are those things that make that sort of development program important. And so the final take on this is that what is so very, 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 very interesting about this is that we are the crafters of that program. We decide for ourselves how we see ourselves moving forward. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to be part of the reparations movement, because I suspect if the opportunity was given to the oppressors, they would have created for us what they wanted, not what we want for ourselves. So this is how we view the development process itself.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the whole notion of reparative justice not just being about a check, because oftentimes when you talk about reparations, that's the first thing that springs into people's minds. Oh, it's just about money. So I'm going to ask you to just expand a little bit, and Frederick, if we could get Professor Shepard to opine on this as well, just talk about some of the other non-monetary benefits of which there are significant numbers of reparatory justice, non-monetary. First you, Minister, and then if Professor Shepard can.
Okay.
Okay, so for sure, we have to look at our institutions and of learning and how they inculcate within them the sort of narrative that relates and that speaks to reparations and indigenous genocide. We also have to get through to even our spiritual institutions, because even as we speak, the population of my community is predominantly Christian. So we have little or no trappings of our indigenous religion, which I would argue that colonization was almost complete because we lost almost all of our trappings of our heritage. We also have to look at the opportunities for education. It's very important, because like some of the great leaders in the historical context have spoke about, and education has been that sort of liberation from a present existence. And we also have to look at how do we develop our arts and craft, and how do we keep the material culture of the communities growing. So all of these are non-monetary sort of benefits we can derive from that movement.
Yeah. You want me to jump in here? Okay. First, let me just say something. When you have a case, one of you is a lawyer, I think, or maybe more than one, I don't know. But when you take a case to court, let's say, you're awarded damages, you're awarded monetary compensation, and you spend it how you want. Nobody says why you're spending it this way or that way. That's your business. That's the first thing. So nothing is wrong with money. And if it is that is what some people want, they have a right to say that's what we want. And yes, people say, but no, don't give it to people because they're going to buy bling bling. So what if that is what you want to do with your money? However, we are saying that it is better to demand money, by the way, because it takes cash to care. It takes cash to develop, right?
Here.
So we'll have to negotiate for a financial package. That financial package, however, will be put into a pool for development. And we have the strategy. We have talked about the health crisis which we have in our region. We have seen how COVID-19 is affecting Black people right across the world, not just in the Caribbean. Look at Brazil, look at other parts of Latin America, look at the United States of America. And then people say, oh, well, because some of you are old, well, old age is not a reason to die. And you can, or they have comorbidities. What are the comorbidities and why so many Black people have them? Type 2 diabetes, hypertension, because of enslavement and 300 years of bad treatment and bad diet and too much salt and too much sugar, because that's what the diet was, and the intergenerational transmission of the intolerance of processing sugar and salt. So I don't have all the medical answers, but I'm saying that from what I've been learning from my medical friends, that's part of it. So then we inherit this illiteracy, because remember, our post-colonial governments have been running to catch up, to use their own resources to build societies. And we have to credit them with that, even if we're not satisfied with the pace of it or whatever. So a financial package properly negotiated by an independent group will be able to say we need so many schools if we're going to address access to education, if we're going to have quality education, we need so many teacher training colleges and so many teachers trained. We need clinics, hospitals, trained doctors. We need money for that. So the package is going to be one which is going to be financial, but it's just not going to each person's bank account. It is for the collective, that collective of which Minister speaks. So this is how it will work. But I just wanted to say, nothing wrong with money. It is just we're using the money in a different way. But I want to also go back to the issue of education, because Honorable Cozier Frederick is here as a living testimony of what happens when somebody invests in people's education. And so there is internal reparation going on in our own societies. And I have to thank Professor Hilary Beckles for that as well, because you have heard Cozier Frederick thank him. But maybe what you don't know, Minister, is that I introduced something called Taino Day, Indigenous Peoples Day in Jamaica, because they are here somewhere, even residing in our DNA. People from AfricanAncestry.com, they tell me that they have done tests in our space, and part of that mixture is Indigenous people. So they are here somewhere and reside in the Maroons and so on. So I asked Professor Beckles when he was principal of Cable Campus can you finance some of the Indigenous people, students you have there, let them come to Jamaica so that we can share this presence and this knowledge and their culture. And it was so wonderful. He did. So students gathered, they wanted to touch them. Oh my God, they told me you were dead. Your people were dead. It was transformative. These are the kinds of actions we need by thought leaders like Hilary Beckles, thought leaders, people with a sense of justice and how they can, as administrators, turn their jobs as administrators into a kind of job, a kind of administration which addresses the colonial mess that was left here in our education system and ensure that there are ethical institutions geared towards the people of the region. And I really hope we have him around for some more time, because this is a work in action. But I wanted to put that in.
Indeed, indeed. Well, again, there's so much packed in that. The issue of money is a very real, because yes, in law, and I am one of the lawyers on the panel, that's what you go for. That's the compensation, monetary damages. And you're right, nobody asks how you're going to spend it after. So this idea that we should be running away from monetary compensation is one that needs to be completely.
That's right. That's right.
In fact,
but we propagate the fact of how we want this money to be used. That's the difference.
Indeed. In fact, I mean, you probably can help me sort of elaborate on this point. But when slavery was abolished, there was a scheme put in place in order to compensate not the slaves, but the slave owners for the loss of their property, right? Correct. And indeed, there was, the scheme said you would get, and I can't remember the numbers, but let's say 20 million.
20 million.
It was 20 million, okay. So you get 20 million, and then the other 20 million would come from the slaves themselves. So
from
there was
from the so-called apprenticeship system, the scamming, that was called apprenticeship. Yeah, in free labor for 4 more years.
Right, correct. So
well, Antigua didn't go through that, I know, but for a different reason. Dorbrene, I'm so sorry, Dorbrene had a power cut, so he can't.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yes, but he would have told us about that, about
I see.
Barbuda decided on a different path. It wasn't.
I see. I was wondering. Okay, yes. Well, we'll have to have him on for another panel, because he has that he would have to bring forward.
Yes.
But yes, and I want to pursue this issue of money again, because I just think it's important, and as a lawyer, that and sort of developing the case that might ultimately have to be litigated if we are to get anywhere, right? We have to stick on this point for a second. So here you have at that point, at least an understanding that there needed to be some compensation for some folks, the wrong folks, but some compensation, right? And then let's teleport into our current situation with the COVID pandemic, right? So you get a COVID pandemic, and immediately all the countries, and certainly those countries that are able to do so, like the superpowers like the United States and the UK, they develop stimulus packages, right?
That's right.
And they have to stimulate the economy. And that stimulus package does include a check to every taxpaying citizen, right? And you have to demonstrate, of course, that you're entitled to the check, but you get a check. And somehow they come up with a scheme that is supposedly equitable. in the distribution of that money, right? So we need to be able to say in moving this case along that it isn't impossible to come up with a scheme in order
it's
to.
not impossible. You're
At all.
right. Yes, it's not impossible. And of course, the Caribbean governments have been doing their part in trying to give a stimulus package also to to vulnerable people. And certainly know Jamaica has done that. But it's not within the power, it's not within our economic resources to give anything that looks like what they are giving in the developed countries, you see. And I firmly believe that now is the time to push more for monetary justice, for that financial package that will help us to cope with what we're facing now, climate change. Where you think that environmental degradation started with plantation construction, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, I think the minister will tell you, they cut down trees, plantation, you know, buildings, and without any concern. Later on, of course, they suffer from drought. And we are seeing the effects even today. We're vulnerable. And it all started with that. And so we're saying, yes, at the moment of emancipation, what is now 17 billion pounds sterling would have been given out, with Jamaica getting about, I don't know, between 30 and 40% of it because of the number of enslaved Africans. And this is what was why Professor Beckles talks about the racism of the Emancipation Act. The Emancipation Act presupposed, it was based on the notion that our people were property, because that property that they said we are going to, assign money for the value. So they had to value every single person. A child, what does a child value? If below 12 or over 12, over 6, what about a man, age so and so? What about a woman? If they are challenged in some way, okay, well, that's not so valuable. In fact, my colleague, Professor Chris Mandrapper, tells me that even runaways were valued and claimed for. And then now the apprenticeship systems, so-called, value another 25 to 27 million pounds from what Professor Beckles' research shows. So, and then they borrow this money, pay the planters, and then tell us it was in the, everything is in the history, is history. Why did they just finish paying it off in 2015? Which means that taxpayers in the UK, Black people,
paying for their own.
To pay, exactly, And then what about Haiti? Look at what France extracted in as reparation from Haiti, So we are talking about the unconscionable acts of colonizers and the inequity in how they treat reparation for some groups, but not for other groups, And so how they apologize to other groups. I think if I'm reading right here, I remember in 1998, for example, President Ronald Reagan signed legislation complete with reparations, extending a formal apology for Japanese American internment on American soil during World War II. So, so we have cases like these. We have the Jewish Holocaust, Our people have to stand up and say, we're negotiating a package. This is what it will go for, because our society, we can do an audit of our societies and say, Dominica needs so many hospitals. Up in the Kalinago country, we need so. We need, this is what it requires. And don't tell me about loans and grants and handouts. We're not asking for that. We're saying, come to the table, negotiate, have a respectable package, and come back to clean up this colonial mess. The University of the West Indies in the 1940s established a medical school to clean up disease. But we have a different kind of disease legacy. And that's why UWI was so important with their band of historians to treat colonialism and its deformities as a disease and to address it through our scholarship. Ensure that we understand who our icons are. Satouye, not just these people we call abolitionists and put them up on poles as if they're all that. And we in the Caribbean have a responsibility to take down those who are oppressors from our landscape. It's part of the decolonization process. We can't be jumping up and down and oh, Black Lives Matter. Everywhere else but in our space, it's not okay. Not okay.
Indeed.
I agree, Prof. And even to the point where part of the conversation within the Dominica space for a long time, coming out of the 70s with the whole Black Power movement and the movement for carries at the time was, at the time, my fathers and my uncles was speaking about the fact that we felt like a third citizen in our own country. So there was a subtle kind of discrimination happening within. So while there was oppression from the colonizers, the people of African descent who got the lands at the end of it were also passing on a subtle kind of discrimination. And it's something we had to grow out of and to educate people about, because it's important. I mean, when we speak about reparations, we need to understand something very, very fundamental. We have to understand what was the nature of Europe at that time. Why did Europeans have to come out of their particular spaces? Why did they go out? And when they went out there, what did they see? And how was that sort of extractive process benefiting their particular species? The development of banks and insurance companies and enterprises. All of this is something that it is something that I think is not spoken about enough, because when the European descendants speak about, oh, it's been 400 years, it's in the past, but they are beneficiaries right now as we speak of that sort of injustice. And so it is unfair to even in the context of COVID to expect Caribbean governments to survive on by itself. Knowing that we are only 40 years old, at least 40 years old. And we're speaking about first world countries that have centuries of development structures that they created to benefit for themselves. So it's something that we have to look inward and something that has to be part. I'm so happy, Prof, that you there leading that charge at the CARICOM level at the research center to get young intellectuals like myself to understand that it goes beyond just what we see. And even if it may not happen in our lifetime, we should push in the very same way that my ancestors, they don't know that I would rise out of that situation to speak on it. More than 600 years after that first sort of discovery or sort of invasion. I'm happy to be part of this movement, and it's something I think that the Caribbean citizen must be part of, because I think it's unfair to expect it in our lifetime, but it is good to be part of the process so that down the road our grandchildren and people come after us can benefit from that sort of activism and that sort of passion for wanting justice for something that is the biggest crime against humanity, and it's something that we need to speak out and we need to passion about.
But I don't think you should give up so easily and say it might happen in your lifetime. You're young. Who thought that we would even be here? Who thought we'd be here in this way in 2020, talking so much everywhere about reparatory justice?
That's the truth.
The University of West Indies is developing an MA in reparatory justice. We are collaborating with an MSc in reparatory justice.
Oh, wow.
Courses being developed, right? And also institutions that we never thought would budge. The Bank of England, the Green King pub chain, Lloyd's of London that insured the ships, the slavers, like the Zong. That tragedy that we're going to start marking on the 29th of November, because 132 live souls were thrown overboard deliberately. These acts to claim an insurance, you know, and it was insured, the Zong was insured by Lloyd's of London. We're talking about universities like Harvard, Yale, Georgetown, Brown. They're all researching their past, Bristol. And the university at which I did my PhD, Cambridge, Jesus College, one of those oldest colleges, they have established a legacy working party to look into the legacy, their history of enslavement. Glasgow is doing it. London is doing it. No, according to Prof. Beckers, we hope they don't research and run. we have to hold them responsible. You know, there was a man at Jesus College. He was a member of the Royal African Company. Branded people or ancestors, you know? And also Dorbrene, if you were here, would have told you about the case that Antigua Barbuda is pushing against Harvard Law School because Isaac Royal, this is where research is important. We are digging up the evidence. Isaac Royal made his money in Antigua Barbuda, invested in Harvard Law School. So we have a case. So what I'm saying is that the Lloyds and all the others are saying we need to enter into a reparatory justice conversation. So the state will not budge, but at least we are seeing some movement that we never thought we'd see in our lifetime. So my brother, hold strong.
Well, I mean,
for sure.
To hear, though, that the University of the West Indies is doing or considering a master's degree course in reparatory justice. Of course, a cynic might say that universities overseas are probably going to do the same thing as well, charge all kinds of money to do those courses, collect more money out of this whole issue.
They're probably doing it already.
And here we go again.
We have to, but you see, sometimes we have to just make sure that our people get the knowledge which will make them go after them.
Of course. Well, something that Professor, that you said, Professor, prompts me to ask the Minister a question about, I mean, again, the Minister is responsible for Indigenous people's development as part of the 10-point action plan. So, and I have to ask a tourism question. So,
yeah, you can't help yourself.
It'd be if I did not. But Professor Shepard sort of underlined the fascination. It goes beyond curiosity, the absolute reverence that people accord to Indigenous populations. People want to see and touch and be with and understand more of. But there is that line between that curiosity and objectification.
Yeah.
How can we, I mean, this is a tourism asset which is unique. So how can we really use this as an attraction? Tourism is, after all, the engine that's driving our economies in the Caribbean to a large extent, and we have assets. How do we use these assets, Minister, without objectification?
So on the island, we do have a model village that acts as a sort of heritage site that details sort of a history of the people on the island. What we are now moving into is a more immersive experience, because we are in contemporary times. We have to also have people appreciate how we survive in the modern period. So we are moving into what we call a community tourism project that will encourage people not just going into a museum setting, but to immerse themselves in the community and to participate in the preparation of food, to socialize, etc. So this is the way we're moving, because we rightly saw that people wanted to see aspects of us in sort of a glass case, but we are very much alive.
Of course. And
some of our behaviors have changed over time. So there's also the conversation within the local sphere, discussing how far do we take the heritage? How far do we keep on the fundamental aspects of our heritage while being competitive in a sort of global environment? So we suspect that the more immersive cultural development would be something that we would cause a better appreciation for us as not a myth, but very much alive today. So this is the new context in which we are operating.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got to say, every time we have these panels, it's like it feels like we need the entire day to deal with, and maybe longer to deal with these issues. You know, but I think we did a pretty good job today of going through quite a bit. I'll ask the sort of final question. Oh my gosh, look, Dorbrene has just arrived. Dorbrene, it's good to have you back. How are you?
I'm so embarrassed, man.
It's okay.
Internet just went out. I jumped in my vehicle. I drove to the office. Internet day is out too, so I'm back home, and it's just come back up.
All right, no problem. Well, now that you've joined us, we were just about to conclude, but we're gonna have you. No. We're gonna ask you a few questions, and then we'll conclude, and then we'll have you back, so that you can, you know, have an opportunity to speak on some of the things that I know you are an expert in. So let's one of the things that we touched upon that we know that you know quite a bit about is the public health impact of slavery, and the fact that we are, you know, second to none in certain areas, hypertension and diabetes, etc. Give us a sense of that impact, and how the 10-point plan and how our goals are, what our goals are in order to address that in the context of that plan.
Well, certainly. We're talking about an epidemic of non-communicable diseases in the Caribbean. In the African populations, we are looking at prevalence rates of 9–10% of the population with diabetes at least. It's estimated that 60% of our population over 60 years of age would have either diabetes or hypertension or both. It is that serious. Now, when we look at the prevalence rates, for example, in African populations on the continent, we are seeing rates of approximately 3.5–4% of general, I'm using the term African in African populations in a very wide sense. But let's say at least West African populations, we are looking at rates at about 3–4% of population. So it's very, very clear that something has happened to the African populations here in the Caribbean. Those rates for diabetes, hypertension are found perhaps only in one other place in the West, in Mississippi, in the United States, and clearly perhaps resulting from the same experience. The whole study of the new emergent study of epigenetics is pointing clearly to the transmission of trauma from one generation to the other generation. That trauma itself will have impact on genetic structure. And genetic structure, we know, is communicated from one generation to the other generation. And the subsequent generation generally has very negative responses again to trauma and again to stress. And these negative reactions we are experiencing in the present generation, we are very clear, are pointing, of course, to the transmission of the trauma of enslavement, the trauma of colonialism to present generations of Caribbean people. And so, so long as we're able to make that connection between the crime against humanity, essentially, which is what we're saying that slavery was, the enslavement of African people was, and the resulting impact, which is now within this Caribbean, the prevalence of NCDs, non-communicable diseases, we are saying firmly that this is subject to reparatory justice. You know, how does this happen? Most of the literature that we find around diabetes and hypertension, I mean, I'm talking top level literature, the PAHO, WHO literature, etc., will point a lot to all the causes for health disparities between populations. But not too much of the literature points to the efficacy of the treatment of these diseases. You know, we know, yes, we must deal with diets, we must deal with physical activity, you know. We have a very clear view of all the contributions to good health. But we are at a stage where we are talking about treatment. Now, our scientists are pointing to the fact that the existing drugs that we're using for these diseases, that they have low, or well, let's say about 60, 70% efficacy on the African genetic structure, where, you know, they tested on Europeans and they are 90, 95% effective there. And they're about 60, 70% effective here. Now, the idea is that small tweaks in the molecular structure of some of these drugs could make them more efficient on African genetic structure. But it is the cost of doing that for small populations. Why the commercial companies, obviously the big corporations, are not interested in spending $1 billion, $2 billion to tweak a drug for 5, 10 million of us. And this is where reparations become important.
Right.
That it is through reparations that we can gather that amount of funds that could help us to make those adjustments and save thousands of lives in this Caribbean annually. And not only in the Caribbean, but in Caribbean populations elsewhere in the diaspora.
Indeed, indeed. Mr. Riley, would you like to follow up on that? I have one more question for Dorbrene, but you may have a question for him as well.
Well, I wanted to make sure, Dorbrene, and you missed this when we were talking earlier with your colleagues on the panel, that this is really reaching the right ears and eyes, and that the people of the Caribbean have a clear understanding of the kinds of things that you have just said, because I am guaranteeing you that most people either are somehow still outside of the bounds of this discussion, or they have some casual knowledge of it, but really haven't had the benefit of the kind of passion and the facts that you have just shared with us, and that your colleagues on the panel have so generously shared with us today. How is that resonating? Who are you saying this to? Who's hearing and who's responding?
Here in Antigua, I think we are experiencing a fairly decent response. I would say a year or two ago, the concept of genetic transfer of trauma caused a lot of consternation, especially among the physical fitness and the health experts themselves, who said, no, that is making up stories, etc., etc. But I think that over the years, and as a lot more evidence becomes available to us through our conferences, through our exchanges and programs like this, I think we are feeling clearly a wider acceptance. Well, certainly a wide acceptance of the concept of reparations. But then when we get to, you know, we get to the nuts and bolts of it, as we are dealing with on this program, it's still going to take a little more time and a little more exposure for the wider population. I think we have a fairly decent acceptance here. With some of the caveats, you know, hope the money don't go to the politicians, you're sure you're going to get that, etc., etc. But fairly decent.
Thank you.
Right. And that's good to hear. I mean, there's a ton of work to be done. I don't think you were on the line when we said that the network is definitely going to be here with you guys to disseminate that information. We are your partner in reparatory justice. There was, I think it was Professor Shepard who pointed out, and this will be our penultimate question. I have one last question, but this will be the penultimate. Professor Shepard pointed out that if you were on the live at the time, you would talk about a particular case that Antigua has with regards to Harvard Law School.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of background on that, just to let our viewers know what that case is about?
Yeah, well, to put briefly, the founder of Harvard Law School, essentially, is the son of a slave owner, an enslaver here in Antigua. And just after the 1736 Prince Class revolt here in Antigua, he packed up, obviously sold out property, etc., including his property of enslaved persons. And it is from those funds, he then returned to Massachusetts, and it is from those funds that he bequeathed the monies to start the Harvard Law School. So what we're really saying, and what the Antigua government has said, from the Prime Minister and Ambassador level has said, is that that establishment of that school is from the proceeds of enslavement here in Antigua. And therefore, we want to talk reparations with you. There was an initial resistance from Harvard itself. But subsequently, within the last couple of months, they have now agreed at least to have the conversations. And so that is in process right now. It's being handled outside of the level of the Reparations Commission itself right now. It's being handled at ambassadorial and at Prime Minister level.
I see. Well, very interesting. You know, as a lawyer myself, you know, I always find these issues that tie up with legal issues are important for us to understand, because at the end of the day, to get what is absolutely owed, it may come down to a legal case that will have to be made. So this is very interesting, particularly with Harvard Law School. I mean, there's professors like Charles Ogletree and several others that, you know, that talked about, is Cornell? No, Cornell West was not there. He's at Princeton. Right. But well, I thank you for sharing that with us. And like I said, that we'll have you back, Dorbrene, because in order for you to share some more of your views. I said my question to you was the penultimate one. Here's the ultimate one. I was having, just before this this live, well, it was maybe two days ago, I was telling a minister here in the country that I'm in, saying that we're having a live on reparations. And I mentioned that we had part 1, etc. And the response immediately was quite shocking. Immediately before I was even able to say what I was saying about the live, it was oh, that's not going to happen. That's a waste of time. And this was you know, at such a high level that I thought that it was again, it was shocking. So how do we get it into the psyche of our people at all different levels that this is possible, not just in you know, Minister Frederick's young lifetime, in that it is actually possible, and that in order for something to happen, we have to make the demand. It may not happen right away, but how do we get that into the psyche of our people? Professor Shepard.
Oh, I thought you were looking forward to Dorbrene's answer. I thought.
Oh, no, this is the ultimate question. Everybody's going to have a do at this one, and then we'll close.
Yes. Well, you know, I think when our ancestors were fighting for emancipation, all those centuries of war, of resistance, I don't think they dreamt that emancipation would have become a reality. But they kept on, and they kept on, and every generation launched a bid for freedom. That's what we have to do. Those of us who are in the reparation movement, those of us who are leaders, administrators, people in the media, those of us who are educators, we just have to keep on doing what we are doing, because those who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
Indeed. Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, I don't know how you're going to top that, Minister Frederick. Let's go.
Yes, I think we owe it. We as this present generation, this modern digital generation, we owe it to our ancestors who shed blood and tears to do our bit to ensure that those we leave behind benefit from a much better way of life, knowing that historical wrongs happened and we played our part to ensure that we have that correction.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was pretty good. That was pretty good, Minister Frederick. Dorbrene.
Coming to me now. Listen, I think we need to win, how's it, small battles in the whole war. And I think over the last decade or so, we have seen some of these small battles being won. We have seen the universities, the academia in particular, across the United States and in Europe, beginning to own up to their relationship to the enslavement of African people. And we are getting these small advances. Some have actually established reparations programs. I mean, we have had instances where our chairperson, Sir Hillary has reached into the British Parliament to have these discussions. He has reached onto the Senate floor, or in the Senate periphery in the United States to have these discussions. We have seen the issue of reparations appearing in the Democratic the US presidential campaign among the Democrats, where the discussion is now rare and the issue is back on the forefront. And I think that it's these little victories, one by one, as we continue, as I think, as my colleague said, as we continue dealing with our historical responsibility as descendants of African enslaved people here in this region. That is our responsibility. We will continue to address that responsibility. And these little chinks in the armor, these little responses, the new committees being formed in Europe, new reparations commission being formed in Switzerland, for example, the continued work of other reparations commission, the engagement now with African countries that back in 2001 were very scared of addressing this topic of reparations. I mean, they stayed away from it. As a matter of fact, some even voted against it. And now we are seeing them also coming around. And I think we just need to keep, dealing with our responsibility and showing the naysayers that things are happening. Showing them that virtually every other group that has been wronged has received reparations. And ask the question, why not African people? Mm-hmm. I think that has to be our approach, and essentially is the approach that I think we're finding within the commission.
Awesome, excellent. Well, this has been amazing. Mr. Riley, would you have any final thoughts that you wish to convey?
Well, just to emphasize what our panelists have all said in different ways. I mean, we're all from cricket playing nations, so I can use a cricket analogy. I mean, singles matter too when in winning a match. It's not just about boundaries. So all these little victories. But I also want to say though that don't discount the importance of the naysayers. They sometimes propel us to greater heights. They make us prove that we can do the impossible. The impossible just takes a little longer.
Indeed. And nothing is impossible. What is somebody help me, because that just brought to my mind a quote from Nelson Mandela, that you thought that it was impossible until you do it.
It always seems impossible until it happens.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Right. So we will hold on to that. I want to thank everyone for the time this afternoon. Time well spent, I believe. We had some technical difficulties, but we got through those, power outage in Antigua and all kinds of different things. but we managed, and that's what we do as our people have managed through these difficulties over these hundreds of years, and so we will continue to do that. So thank you very much, everyone. To our Temple family, we thank you for always being with us, and know that this is a topic that we're going to be bringing to you on a very consistent basis. Until we actually get the job done. So we will be moving along in that course. So thank you once again. This is the road ahead. My name is Frederick Morton. I am the CEO and chairman of Tempo Networks, and it has been a privilege to present the case for Caribbean reparations here on the road ahead. See you next time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.